Hey guys, Chris here. We are all packed up and ready to hit the road for our third camping trip of the season, but this is a very different camping trip because we will be tent camping and we are heading to Southwest Virginia. The views along the drive were so beautiful we did have to pull over once if not twice, in between rain showers that is. It was a very wet drive and I want to say it took us over 6 hours to get to Cumberland Gap Historic National Park, which is where we camped. And by the time we got there, luckily the day's rain was over. After we put our tent up, the next thing we did was put the brown pop-up tent up. We brought this because it was going to be very wet, and we do like to not only stake our tent down, but we also tie it to our coolers to help kind of give it a little more weight and stability. Our campsite did have water and electric. We didn't need the water, but we did use the power to run fans to stay cool in the afternoon. And we did our cooking over a single propane burner. You know, we had soup and chili, super simple camping meals. We enjoyed a little campfire, and then we turned in and got a really good night's rest our first night in our tent. The next morning, though, we did wake up to rain. It was a very wet trip. We had coffee because of the power. We ran our coffee pot and had a very consistent morning cup of coffee, which was always a nice way to start the day. And then we set off on our first adventure to Wilderness Road State Park. As we first pulled into the park, we saw a small herd of bison out in the field. And then we went to check out the historic Martin Station. This is a pretty neat outdoor living history museum. It very much depicts what frontier life was like around 1775. Our next place to explore was the town of Cumberland Gap. They have, I believe, 2 really neat covered bridges. And so, we were able to park pretty close to this walkway, this pathway, and we were able to walk across them and really, check them out. I love bridges and overlooks. And after that, we went to find the iron furnace. This is situated at the bottom of a little creek that comes down the side of the mountain, and you can take a short little hike up to the top. You can see that small waterfall coming down, and it was just, a lovely little thing to go and explore, and to think that this small creek was able to power that great big furnace down below. The power of water is pretty impressive. And after exploring here, we made our way back to the campground. For dinner, we had something simple like soup or chili, again heated over that single burner. And overnight, we stayed nice and dry in the tent, but early in the morning, we did hear another round of rain beginning to fall. Waiting for the morning rain to finish up. It was dry overnight, which was great. We had our coffee. We do have power, which is fun. We had our coffee and Pop-Tarts for breakfast. And this morning rain should be moving out here in the next, 30 plus minutes. And then we're gonna head off and see if we can't find some sights. There should be some nice overlooks. We're here at the Cumberland Gap National Historic Park. Because we knew it was once again going to rain off and on pretty much all day long, we did take an extra tarp that we brought, and we covered all of our belongings inside the tent just in case it began to drip. We weren't sure how long our tent was really going to remain waterproof. So then we set off and we went through a tunnel. This is a mountain tunnel right here at Cumberland Gap, and that led us to the visitor center, which was very close to this pinnacle overlook. And that was our first hike of the day. This was a very easy walk to the overlook. It was nice and paved. It was fun here. We saw the Virginia-Kentucky border, able to straddle that. And then as you made your way through the trees to the opening of the overlook, it was breathtaking. This is perhaps one of the more beautiful overlooks that we have seen. We've seen a lot of really pretty ones, but this one was just so expansive. And to be able to look from left to right, You know, you could see the mountains and the fog. The weather was a little unpredictable, and so off in the distance here, you can even see not only the town below of Cumberland Gap, but you can see the rain is just moving in, these sheets of rain. And so we did have to make sure that we didn't dilly-dally too long. We wanted to get back to the car before the rain hit us, but we did so just in time. The next overlook we knew we wanted to set out in search of was the Tri-State Overlook. This particular area is where 3 states converge, the states of Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And so, you know, this was a little bit longer hike than the previous one to Pinnacle, but it still was not a bad hike. And because of the rain, the temperatures weren't too hot, but we did take our raincoats because I think we did get sprinkled on either heading up or coming back, I forget which. But at the top of this tri-state area, you do have another opening, another lovely overlook. And so on our way back down, we saw a cool rock formation and there was a little cave inside. And that was kind of how we wrapped up that second day of hiking in Cumberland Gap. Now, this is where things get a little exciting. Overnight, as we were tent camping, we heard a noise outside the tent. And I roused my husband, who peeked outside and saw a bear trying to make off with our cooler. So we clapped our hands, we made a lot of noise, we tried to scare him off, and that didn't work, and so we had to hit the panic button on the car, and then the bear finally ran off, leaving our cooler behind. But that was quite something. So after the bear scare, we then went back into the car and finished up our night's rest. Well, truth be told, we probably didn't do much resting, and I certainly don't think we did much sleeping. But once the sun came out, we hopped out of the car, and you could see there were tracks, muddy bear tracks, and the tent where the bear had been pulling on it had been scratching the ground. That is because we had tied our cooler to the tent so the wind wouldn't blow it. But you can see there are some muddy prints going up the hillside. And then as we looked closer at our cooler, you could see where there were claw marks or teeth marks. You know, we'll never really know which, but the cooler was marred a bit. And then it was time for a little coffee. You know, that's a good way to start most any day, especially one when you haven't had much sleep. The sun, as we drank our coffee, was beginning to come out, which was a lovely sign. And so after we had had our morning breakfast, it was then time to start packing up. You know, we started taking the tent down and putting everything away. It's quite an ordeal to get all of our supplies into the back of the car, but we did. You know, we do have a lot here. I mean, we probably overpacked in some ways, but we had everything we needed and we were very comfortable. We have everything all packed up in the car. The car is absolutely filled to the gills. And we are traveling today from Cumberland Gap up to Breaks Interstate Park. I think it's a little over a 2-hour drive. So it should be another really fun place. And we'll take lots of pictures once we get there. As we began to make our way towards Breaks Interstate Park, we went through another mountain tunnel. There are several of these mountain tunnels in this part of the state. And all along the roadside, there were these beautiful pull-offs where you could, you know, hop out, take in the overlooks. You know, this part of the state is just really very beautiful. And, you know, if you love the mountains, I would highly recommend it. Along the way, we saw something else pretty interesting. We had to slow down. We put our flashers on because we saw a bear crossing the road. Lots of bear activity today. He made a very good decision here. Breaks Interstate Park is a shared park between Virginia and Kentucky. It sits on the border. And no sooner had we pulled into the park proper than we saw the "Attention, you're entering bear country" sign. They do take bear awareness very seriously here at this park, and all of your coolers and all of your food type belongings must be packed up in a vehicle or bear-proof box anytime you step away from your campsite. So after we put up our tent, we made sure that everything was put away, and then we set out in search of more beautiful overlooks. Something that is very impressive here with this particular park are the vast number of scenic overlooks. A lot of parks you go to will have one, maybe two, but there were, I would say 6 or 7 or more just really beautiful scenic overlooks. This particular area, some people consider the Grand Canyon of the East because, like the Grand Canyon, this deep crevice or valley has been carved out by the river below, leaving those kind of rock bluffs and those rock walls on either side. And, you know, there is plenty of foliage now. Lots of things were in bloom. There are plenty of trees that are also growing. But it is a very rocky wall that you have that drops down towards that river. The overlooks are all on a nice big loop that you can drive in your car. So you can drive close to them, but you do have to hike down many stairs to get to the viewing level. And so although they are somewhat accessible by vehicle, they're not handicap accessible. Now this particular overlook here was Towers Overlook, and it's really neat because you can see this horseshoe bend of the river leaving that tall tower of rock. Just everywhere we went, all of these overlooks were beautiful and breathtaking. This one reminded me of Cumberland Gap when we could really just look out and see from left to right, nothing but mountains. This park did not disappoint. If you love the outdoors, you love the mountains, this is definitely a place that you will want to come and check out. You know, some people do water activities down on the river. We did not. We really just had a very short stay. But here I think was the last overlook that we saw as we drove the loop. And then after that, we went back to the campground, had a nice relaxing evening. We did have the camp playground directly behind us, which is why we were looking out at the woods. And then we finished the evening with a nice little campfire and a very quiet, uneventful overnight, which I'm very happy to report. And then it was time for morning coffee, a quick bite to eat, and more packing up. When tent camping, I do feel a lot more time is spent packing and unpacking than RV camping, which is what we normally do. So this was a special trip to go tent camping. On the way home, I think we went through 2 more mountain tunnels, which were kind of fun. You know, we don't have those close by in Central Virginia. And I want to say it was a 5.5 to 6 hour drive home from Breaks Interstate Park. But it was so worth it. You know, we loved every minute of our camping trip, even the bear excitement. And if you love tent camping, check out these parks because they were a lot of fun. Bye, guys.